Thanks for listening. Before the episode gets started, I wanted to leave you a quick message. One, in episodes 2, 3, and 4, we realized that there was a couple of audio issues with our recording mic and our setup and all of that stuff. We launched this podcast without buying a lot of gear and without knowing 1,000,000% what we were doing in terms of how to handle audio files and all of that stuff. And so the second, third, and fourth episode all have some issues with them where a guest maybe sounds really quiet or someone pounds on the table and it hits the mic stand or something like that. So those things happen in those episodes. If you're the type of person who gets really bothered by that stuff, then I would suggest you start at episode 1 that is just Allie and myself, or you could skip ahead to episode 5 with our friend Simi, and that audio is much more clear and we don't have all of those issues. So thanks for bearing with us and learning. We've had great feedback on episodes 2, 3, and 4, so those are great. Our guests share great stuff, great stories. We have a great time with them, but if audio bothers you a lot, go to episodes 1 or 5. Peace. Thank you. On today's episode, we are going to talk to who?
David Sherry.
David Sherry.
Wow, I said that with such a smile. I feel like you can... Isn't it weird that you can tell when someone's smiling and then, like, right now I'm not? Anyways.
I can tell because I can see you.
True.
And so it's obvious.
Wouldn't it be funny if they're like, did we record in separate
booths?
I was going to say rooms. Anyway, so we're talking to David Sherry. Who is the founder of Death to the Stock Photo.
Right.
I was also a founder.
Right, yeah. It's so funny to say that.
Yeah. We talk about that. We talk about why I left Death to the Stock Photo. Yeah. And I don't think we've ever talked about it.
Did you leave in a huff? Is there a lot of drama?
No, none.
No. Wait, that doesn't pique people's interest.
Oh, yeah, there's so much drama. Keep listening.
Behind the scenes.
For the nitty-gritty.
Fights.
Yep.
Screaming.
Tabloid.
There's some cussing and bleeps.
Yep. Actually, that's not true. So, yeah, I started Death to the Stock Photo with David in 2013, and we're talking about how the company has shifted and the things he's learned and the things he's reverting back to, which I found so interesting because I'm like one of the biggest supporters.
And you haven't been involved in it in
2 years.
2 years. Mm-hmm. And so it's changed and shifted, but then it's a crazy thing to like be so involved in something and then
So David, we got to talk to him on Skype. This interview is like one of my favorites just because I was like there when it started, and it's cool to see how much growth has happened, and it's great.
David's cool because he's cool for a number of reasons, but to me he's such a learner. He's like an aggressive learning, reading stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think I used to be more like that. We talk a little bit about that in the episode, but it's almost like you don't need to read a lot of stuff if you just talk to him. Yeah. Because he shares a lot of what he's learning. Yeah. Which is cool. And so he does a lot of that in this episode.
Yeah. I actually don't want to recap anymore because I don't remember. We talked a lot before and after we recorded.
Oh, shoot.
And I have no idea what was actually made it onto the episode.
So some of the secrets that he has
secrets.
May stay secretive, but then also
maybe some aren't.
Yeah. David's left arm is fake. He's been playing it off for years like it's a real left arm.
It's robotic.
Yeah, it's robotic.
If you want to hear more about the robots.
We probably didn't record that. He probably made us take it out.
True.
Bleep it. It's like a bleep. It's like a 7-minute bleep.
That'd be so annoying. So yes, without any further ado. Is that a French term?
Further ado. Like I don't have any more ado.
To do.
My ado is done.
Keep listening. Bye.
Cool. So thank you so much for having me, Adam and Allie. I feel like I have to start this podcast by just expressing my gratitude.
Aww.
You guys have been such a big help in my journey of kind of launching out on my own out of college. I was such like an ignorant, just naive. I feel like a teen. Like I feel like I was like a 14-year-old or something like that when I like entered the world after college.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just want to say thank you to start off this podcast for building community in Columbus and helping me in my early journey. So
Heck yeah.
I went to Ohio State. I'm David Sherry. My name's probably in the title thing, but I went to Ohio State and I studied economics, which I have no idea what somebody who studies economics actually does for a living. And so when I was in school, I got really lucky because I knew I didn't want to follow a traditional path. I knew I didn't want to just get out of school and like take the normal job. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just knew it wouldn't work for me. And so I got really lucky when I was in school and I met another student at Ohio State when I was 19. And he actually had been working on his own iPhone app. And eventually he went on to make like $3,000 a month when he was 19 on the App Store.
That's awesome.
And the reason that was such a big impact or like pivot point for me in my life was I didn't realize that you could like do that.
Yeah.
Like I just didn't know that it was possible to start your own business or like launch something at age 18 or 19. I thought that was something that happened decades down the road.
Yeah.
And so everybody in my life at that point or previous to that point had like decades of experience. So all the entrepreneurs I'd heard from had been kind of in the game for a long time. And then all of a sudden, here's this kid who's 19 and he's making what at the time seemed like an obscene amount of money because he just did it. He just made an app. And so my story kind of really starts by learning about this world I just had no idea about, which was this whole like startup entrepreneurial route. And it was a world that I could enter at that point in my life and not decades down the road. So I feel really lucky in the sense that I was introduced to this strange startup world, this strange world of starting your own business, starting a blog, becoming a freelancer when I was about 19.
Yeah.
And that's the point that really started me down this journey of exploring like what that actually meant. And at first, everything's just so new to you. It's like, what's an iPhone app? Web development? Like, what is that like? And I think that stuff's a bit more normal now, but in 2009, it was like still kind of like, for like what is it, like math on the computer?
Right.
So yeah, I'd say my story really starts there. And it started with me just trying a lot of things, trying to start businesses in college, failing at most of them, pitching in business plan competitions to get funding for businesses I wanted to start. They were all not great ideas, but it gave me a lot of experience. And then from there, I sort of, again, was, I'd say, ignorant to what it was really like in the real world. And I was able to start meeting with a lot of entrepreneurs around town. Like, I don't think I had the sense to worry about reaching out to somebody who was like someone you couldn't normally reach out to, like the CEO of a local company. And I think that's probably how Adam and I got in touch originally. I think I was just emailing a lot of people from around town and just trying to meet up with them. And I really think like if I knew more about what it's like to actually be doing this, I would have been too scared to do that.
Right.
I just was like, I think I was just kind of ignorant. So I met Adam, which I think that was probably 2012 or something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
And I met a bunch of other entrepreneurs around town. I graduated college. I had no idea what I wanted to do at that point, except for I just knew that I wanted to do something related to using my own creativity to make money. Which, by the way, is this too random?
No, this is awesome.
Okay,
no,
so
this is good. We're like, we don't really want you to talk on this podcast.
We just thought you would just.
Well,
I just wanted you to bring your huge Death to Stock audience and then listen to me talk. That kind of was the thing.
Adam's
I was
joking.
thinking.
Okay, well, maybe I can hear from your perspective.
No,
not at all, dude.
We love it.
All right, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, cool. So I'd been reaching out to all these entrepreneurs. I had no idea what I wanted to really do. I was just kind of exploring, and I was just trying a lot of stuff. Like I think probably from 2009 to 2013 or the beginning of 2013, I was just honestly like trying whatever I could and gaining experience and not really having that much success financially, but just a lot of like personal growth. And that's when I was kind of meeting more entrepreneurs. And so I get out of college, I have an economics degree. I don't want to take a job. I want to make it work, making money as a creative, but I still really don't know what that looks like. Yeah. And so for the first year, probably realistically more the first like 8 months, I was what I called at that time a freelancer, which was like I was doing anything I could to make money. I was definitely living the non-glamorous lifestyle, like studio apartment, eating Chipotle, like splitting the meal in two. So it was like my lunch and dinner was like one Chipotle meal. And I actually kind of joke about this time because I remember like taking lots of long walks because when you're a freelancer for the first time, it's pretty weird to have like that much time on your hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you leave school and you're like, what do I do all day? I need to make money. And so you're either kind of spending time trying to figure it out, how to get clients. At that time I was doing some pretty early, like simpler type work, like a video for somebody, copywriting for someone, taking over their social media account. And then I remember also just like seeing all my friends take good paying jobs.
Yeah.
And like you see them in public and they're like, I'm in med school now. Like, I'm going to be a doctor. What are you doing?
You're like, I've been walking around.
Yeah, I'm
outside.
like, I sleep in like, my bed's on the floor and I'm like eating Chipotle. Like half the day is like eating Chipotle and like walking, and the other half is like kind of banging my legs while trying to like get clients.
Right. But
So,
that's hilarious.
So that was definitely what it was like for the first 6-8 months. And that's kind of around the time when I started this big scheme of mine, which was, it was kind of like what I felt really passionate about the time, which was using my creativity to make money. And I really wanted to travel. So I came up with this scheme, which was like, I'm going to pitch local businesses to take all of their photography for their social media and their website and their blog. And I'm going to mix that with some travel I want to do. And so I'm going to like basically drive around the US and like produce all this media for these local companies. And it was kind of the time when like Pinterest and Instagram and Tumblr and all those platforms were really taking off.
Yep.
And so the web was just becoming visual. Like it stopped being all text and started becoming all photos like it is now.
Yep.
And so that was the opportunity. It was like, okay, there's all these social platforms. They all need high quality photos. How are these businesses going to have enough photos to fill all these channels competitively? That was like the problem I saw. And the solution, which was kind of a blend of my passion, was like, I'm going to travel and I'm going to take photos and I'm going to like basically be able to fund my road trip around the US. So I pitched a bunch of local companies, a bunch of companies I admire. I got a connection to some of the CEOs. And I remember being in the office, actually next to your office, the old Jenny's office.
Oh, yeah. That's like right where we are now.
Yeah, right next door. And I pitched the CEO and about 4 people on their marketing team on this idea. That was like one of the companies I pitched. And I remember pitching that company on like this 6-month road trip where I'd take photos for their brand and like drive around and like go to all the Jenny's stores and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And midway through that pitch, I just remember thinking like, what the freak am I doing?
Yeah.
like I have no experience. They have no idea who I am. I just got like a random connection to the CEO. There's like 4 people are spending time listening to this thing. And so it's definitely just part of that like growth where you have to like really do stuff you don't feel confident in doing.
Yeah.
And ended up being that every company I pitched said no. They all just sort of like, hey, this is kind of cool, but like no.
Yeah. Did they say no, or were they like just not responsive? Because I don't know. I envision people listening to this like also either relating or wanting to do something similar to that. Like, at what point did you know you had to like change your angle?
I think they let me pitch because they loved the idea, and I think they said no or didn't respond because there was no like real legs to the idea. So it was almost like, I think it was like, hey, this is like pretty cool. This kid's trying really hard. Like, let's entertain it. But when it comes to brass tacks, which is something that I understand so much more now, they didn't know me. I don't have experience doing it. Like, it's definitely, I fully have no blame on any of those businesses telling me that they didn't want to do that. And right at that time is actually when I met you, Allie, which I think maybe later we could talk about sort of how we kick things off. But right around that time is when I met you, and I also I was feeling bad about myself because none of these businesses wanted to fund my dream. And then I read this book, which is like crazy. I mean,
I just think I think it's funny that you were like, I think I can get people to let me travel. Like it's not hard to understand the like college graduate little lifestyle scheme that you were trying to pull behind the scenes of all of that. Like maybe I can get paid and then like travel all over the place, and I just created the perfect life.
And this is like like everybody doing that with like these like Instagram people who just like travel and stuff. Like it was sort of like even early days for that. And I actually think that it's it's probably more available to do what I was pitching now than it was then. But also it's just as hard. And I think people don't really understand, like, I think a lot of people are also doing that scheme right now, which I don't blame them for. But yeah, it's just interesting because that's something that's sort of happening probably now as well. Anyways, so I had been rejected by, I think I pitched probably 5 or 6 companies. I was like not sure what to do next because like that was the plan, and it felt so exciting at the time. And I probably just felt bad about myself for about a month. And then I read a book called Choose Yourself by James Altucher. And the premise of the book hit home so well because the whole idea is just like, you can't wait around for somebody else to pick you to do the thing you want to do. And I was just kind of going around pitching and like having other people make my scheme happen for me. Like it was like, I can't do this unless one of these other companies says I can do it. And the reality is you have to just choose yourself and just do the thing. And that's how you're going to find the like momentum you need to continue doing it. So it really shifted my perspective to say like, I just have to do this. And that's the reason it's so great that I got rejected by those companies is that's around the time that Allie and I started working on death to stock related stuff, which is what I do today. And if you look at the problem I was trying to solve, which is how do all these big companies around town have enough photography for their social media and their blog and their websites? All of our creative peers, freelancers, web designers, bloggers, they actually have the same problem that these big companies do. And so the idea really shifted from let's just help one company with their social media through this big road trip to let's like help all of our creative peers in this bigger community. And and so just through a lot of conversations, and Allie, you might remember this, we actually were pitching businesses for free product. I don't know if you remember.
No, I remember that. I remember.
Yeah, you got
shoelaces or something and skincare.
You got the Lush Cosmetics. So like it didn't directly I'll kind of give context to that, but it didn't really directly come together that cleanly as I can look back now. But after the rejection, it was like, okay, I need to start like making things happen on my own. And I met you, Allie, through Adam, and we started talking about kind of that same problem. And we're like, okay, businesses need these photos. Like, what if we could just? It was another scheme, honestly. It was like, what if we could get tons of free product just by taking photos and sending them to these companies? So we were emailing companies like you. I think it was Lush, or like it was maybe.
I think it was one like organic, One Love Organics or something.
Yeah, and we just emailed them. And we'd say like, hey, you guys need photos. We'll take photos for you if you send us a bunch of free product if we can keep it. So that was kind of an early phase, but in the bigger context of it is like, instead of letting one company choose the destiny, let's just make stuff happen and then build our own audience and then make it happen on our own. And so we started, and this is kind of what I do today, and I'll give that overview, but we started, Allie and I think this is July 2013.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, we started Death to the Stock Photo, which was essentially just an email list where every month we'd send out 10 high quality photos for download right in your inbox, and you could just use them however you wanted in your blog and your website. It was definitely directed towards people who are freelancers, creatives, not necessarily just like a big company. And Allie was taking all the photos. I think I was doing just sort of the behind the scenes type stuff. And it really started to pick up. Like, I think probably, and you might remember better than me, but probably after about 6 months of doing it, where every month Allie would go around town and like shoot a theme of photos and then send it to our audience over email. Maybe we had like 20,000 people signed up.
Yeah, I think so too. 20 to 30. It grew really fast. Like that was one of those things where we could see that it translated well, and that demographic was so specific to like that one person who's not putting stuff out because they don't have pictures, you know?
Yeah, and it was really helping a lot of people kickstart their projects. And we did a lot of legwork around like just being really human with all the people we'd interact with. So like we'd email people who use the photos, people would email us, and we'd respond. But about 6 months in, we were like, okay, I mean, this is how I remember it, but I'm gonna laugh if you have like a different version.
No, I have a horrible memory, so I'm like, what did we say?
Oh no, okay, I was gonna say I want to hear. But yeah, so I the way I remember it is that we really started saying like, okay, this is like taking off, and maybe we should take it a bit more seriously.
Yeah.
And it was at that point, it was like, well, okay, we've got all these people on this email list. We're sending out photos every month. People are clearly liking it. It's growing. What's like the simplest next step to understand if this is something that is more serious or not? And that's when we decided to launch like a premium option, which was only $5 a month, which is so funny.
Yeah.
Not that it's that much more now, but
right.
And used we like hacked together
a
bunch of different websites.
I remember this.
To make it function. So
yeah.
The way it worked originally was every month you'd get an email from us. It would have a photo pack, which is 10 photos for download, shot in a theme with some commentary by us. Yep. The premium plan was a library that you could access that had all the photos we produced every month, and you actually got double the photos by signing up for the premium plan for $5.
Right.
And we used a wedding photographer software which hosted all the photos, and Gumroad, which is where you purchased, and they actually weren't even connected. So you'd buy through Gumroad, and then we'd send you an email to start signing up on this wedding photography software. So like the experience was so bad. And from what I remember, we said if 500 people sign up for this, we will like take this seriously and make it a business.
Right.
And I think like 416 people signed up.
Yeah.
Like,
and then we were like, wow, we really should have not used these random third party.
Yeah, totally. And that's really the point that I'd say things like actually really started for me and kind of my trajectory. I mean, up until then it was sort of this project, but like once you cross that line and you start taking money and it's a subscription, it's kind of like it's now turning into this own thing. But what was really cool was that was December when we sent out that first email and like used the really shitty software. I don't know if I can swear on this podcast,
but you definitely can.
Okay. And that was the point where we were like, let's take this more serious. And what was so cool was in May, I don't know whose idea it was, but we decided to do a road trip that we were going to crowdfund from that same email list. And I think
which is like a year, I mean, right? Like over a year after you were like, no one wants to do this.
Exactly. It was like
which is so cool.
To a T, like a year later. Like I think I was pitching Jenny's like in April or something like that. And so, it was just really cool because what we did was we said, hey, we're going to travel to 5 different cities and take photos, and everything we shoot on this road trip, you get to keep and like use however you want. And that kind of launched like our first crowdfunding campaign. And I think we only sent out one email and it was funded. And so I kind of want to circle back to me being rejected by Jenny's, because had that worked out, 6 months later, I would have been in the exact same spot.
Yeah.
And I'd
trying
be like,
to convince a different business.
Yes, exactly. And so I think like the 2 lessons for me early on that kind of like really helped or like kind of have helped shape me is the first is that no one's just going to pick you to do the thing. Like nobody's going to be like, yeah, you should be a YouTuber. We're going to pay you $1,000 a month to do this. Like whatever it is that you're trying to do creatively, people generally won't just like pick you out of the crowd and say, go for it. You kind of just have to do it. And the other thing is when you start something, you actually have no idea what it's going to kind of turn into. And oftentimes you get to some of the same places you want to go, but in a roundabout way. So like I was just starting and just doing stuff, and I wanted to travel and take photos. I got rejected the first time, but then like in a roundabout way, I came back and reached that same kind of goal. But it was better. Like it was so much better than what I would have done the first time. So I think the other thing is like when you start on your journey, like Allie, for you doing your paintings or just like Adam doing your coffee, you have no idea what it's going to turn into once you start and you get that momentum. Like I think doors open up and things happen that take you in a better route than what you even wanted. And I think that's why it's so important to like start and get the momentum, because it just leads you places you don't even expect.
Yeah, well, and like, so this season of like this podcast launching with the season about the first 2 years, honestly, is like you basically saying the first 2 years, like sometimes the first year you don't even know what it's going to be. Like, and I think our purpose behind talking about some of this is no one really talks about it, but then also no one thinks, oh, probably the first year in business, like you probably at least know what you're doing. And it's like,
I think so much of, I remember, just being friends with you and very good friends with Allie as Death the Stock was starting. Like we, like just being like, if people knew how much neither of you have any idea what you're doing, if what you're doing is even a business, is you're like charging people $5 a month, and you've like are mildly embarrassed about that, and you have really no idea what to do. I mean, you have a good enough idea what to do if someone gives you $5. I think it's just easy to pay attention to Instagram or Twitter or someone else's story where they're kind of talking about themselves like they know what they're doing, or they're excited to launch this thing or take care of these people. But behind the scenes, it's crazy.
Yeah. I remember, David, I don't know if you remember this, but it was when we got featured on Wired. And that, I think that like helped grow our list. But the comment section, I'll never forget. One person was like, these people are stupid. They just are taking pictures in their basement and sending them out in an email. And I remember being like, basically.
Yeah. Like Wired was like featuring you as a startup or something, and people were like, oh, this is such an innovative idea. And
or someone's like, what is their business model? And I remember like hanging out with you and we were like, well, we don't make money yet.
But I think honestly, no, and I totally remember that same comment. And like, I mean, you get a lot of that, and it's actually not, when you look back, you're like, that's a good sign when you cut people saying that type of stuff.
Right.
I'm going to give credit to Allie, I think, for Adam, kind of what you're bringing up, which is there's actually something like really special and kind of almost like magical about finding momentum doing something and not putting so much, like, I want to say baggage on top of it. Like, I think something that I learned sort of that comes really intuitive for Allie is like letting things play out and letting things feel natural. And I almost think that we actually had more success in how we communicated to our audience, and it's part of the reason that people really enjoyed interacting with us, because when you don't force something and you let it play out and you're not just like working the angles, I guess, and like trying to have this kind of strict plan from like A to B to C, I just think it translates really well. Like I think there's something I think you just have a very good intuitive sense for that. I know we had a lot of conversations alongside like what should we do next that were also just like what's fun for us, like
what do we even want out of life? Like it sounds like such a dramatic question, and I actually give people that advice when they're starting a business with someone. I'm like, David and I would sit down and be like, what do we want out of this? Because it might change next month.
Yeah, and the answers would change over time.
Yeah.
I mean, I just remember, David, you and I are the only people who have ever been business partners with Allie. So we should start like an alumni
cult.
Yeah, a cult.
Yeah, we should have like a monthly meetup or something.
Yeah.
But I think, it's just so much, she like has no scheme. She's just like making stuff and just genuinely excited to share it with a client or someone who's signed up for the email, and like that's about where the whole thing ends. Totally. And I think that is so rare, especially inside of a magazine like Wired, where it's full of some venture-backed thing that has all kinds of market planning and just trying to, sort of launch a product and all sorts of things. It's like there's so much scheming that almost when you have none and you can just be real honest, it's easy. You just tell the truth and then stop talking, and it's easy.
Mm-hmm. What?
For sure, yeah.
So,
I was gonna say.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that's something that I think it's interesting we're chatting now as well, because honestly, what's really interesting for me is I'm sort of at a place now where I'm just trying to get back to that. It's almost like I absorbed a lot. I think baggage is maybe the wrong word, but it's sort of just like what other people want you to do instead of what you want to do. And you take so much of that on, whether it's requests from your customers or just like advice from the people around you, or you're just reading like blogs and books about what you should be doing. It's almost like the last, and I know we're kind of sticking around the first kind of 2-year time frame, but I'd say the next 2 years after that was like me absorbing a lot of stuff I didn't need, and now it's me shaking all of that off again and like going back to that place. And I think this is like a really hard topic to kind of describe. I think, Adam, you're doing a good job of like setting the context there, but everything I've learned up till now is me now like reverting back to some of the stuff that came really naturally early on. So
that's so interesting. What prompted like the pausing and saying, "Oh, I need to kind of get back to where I was"? Like, was it frustration in your like day-to-day like tasks? Was it like
personal?
Were
you just like tired or?
It's all of it. Definitely no doubt that these changes happen when you start feeling like, either stressed or bothered, or like you kind of feel like you're spinning your wheels a little bit. And I'd say it's almost like that naive thing where I was just reaching out to entrepreneurs when I was like younger and like not thinking it was a big deal, just to like email the CEO of a company. It's like when you're in that space, things just go better for you. And then as you take on all these shoulds and like, this is how you should run a business. This is how I almost just think it's like, I don't know if any one thing has prompted it, but I'd say it's been a lot of
small stuff
kind
even.
of, like a lot of like stress. And it's funny because almost after that first road trip, there's like a blank space of like the next 2 years after that. It's such a blur. I like to joke with people that like, I think it's like 2015. I was like, that was the year I was like functionally anxious. Is the way it's like a functional alcoholic. It's like you're just like functional, but you're like stressed,
performing at a high level of stress, or
and it just burns you out. And I don't need to get into like I got kind of sick at the end of last year and stuff, and like we can get into that. We don't have to. It doesn't matter to me. But I guess just to answer the question, it's like I put myself through like a very intense next 2 years of doing it the other way, all so that I could figure out now that like I didn't have to do any of that, and I can kind of just like go back to like how it was. So,
what would you say then? So like, let's think of someone who's listening to this who is either like, oh, I totally get that because I'm on year 4. But what about the people who are entering into the first year? Like, would you give advice on like grounding yourself in, even whether it's like the way that you see your business or identifying the things day to day that you like to do? Or do you feel like people just have to learn it?
It's really something, at least for me, that I've learned through like a lot of, it's almost like the stress and the mistakes and the failures are like sort of what prompts a lot of that. Like, I wish that you didn't have to go through that. I think honestly, a lot of it comes back to, and this is the hardest part, and whether you get there through stress or whether you get there on your own or like through mentors or reading, it's just trusting yourself and honestly having like a great relation. This sounds like kind of woo, but it's like having a great relationship with yourself lets you see a lot more clearly what other people are putting on you, not even like a negative intention way, but like just the feedback people give you, what they think you should be doing with your business, what you read. Like an example would just be, we have so much out there, like so many blogs, so many podcasts, so many things saying like, this is what you should be doing to be happy. This is what you should be doing to be successful. And if you have a really strong relationship with yourself, and if you really trust yourself, you can kind of like not listen to a lot of that and be okay.
Yeah. Or like hear it and not like, you don't have to internalize it.
Exactly. And so with the amount of inputs we have, I think my advice, like I'd say this is part of also how I learned where I'm at now. It's like, I don't need anything else that's going to help me understand better strategy, understand better tactics, like tell me what to do. I actually have to listen to myself more.
Yeah.
And I think what we did in the early days is we just listened to ourselves. We said, we don't know, and that's okay. And we're going to do this next, but we trust that we'll try it out. And like, if it screws up, like, okay, we'll learn, you know? So I think for me, it's been a condensed, like pretty intense 2 years after kind of like really taking off in the business. But it's really interesting because I'm totally just circling back and being like, I just need to trust myself and like lighten up and be like, oh no, it's cool. Like I'm going to do this. And
and I'm like cool with it. And I don't have anxiety in rejecting your suggestion or someone else's like opinion.
I think I've been in I've stopped listening to podcasts, which is make sure you click subscribe and download and share on social networks. But I stopped listening to podcasts and I stopped, I have like one book that I've been reading really slow over the last year, and I just read fiction. And I grew up in like a religious world where we were reading a lot of books all the time about like, this is how you should live life, this is what you should do, just a lot of like should stuff. And for the last year, people ask me all the time, like, what are your favorite podcasts? What books do you love? What have you been reading? And I'm like, nothing. I haven't been doing any of that. And I think in the last year, I've been the most grounded and prolific and like making the best decisions and taking the best next steps, even though, and finding like the best people to ask questions about. I think it's so connected to, I like stop trying to get answers from everybody else in the world, even though there's a lot of really smart people. I think like the people who go through coaching with me is always like, one, they're hiring me to try and be smart for them, but then two, I'm just like, this is about you. And so like, I can't go to work for you. I can't do your job for you. I can't fix your finances. I can't give you the courage to go charge a significant price for the thing you're doing. And it's the thing I think no one tells business owners, especially when they're starting, is like, you can hire somebody for your finances or to be your life coach or to be your marketing, advisor, but you're the person who has to pull all that stuff.
You have to
together.
like be connected. Yeah,
you have to sit in the middle of all of it and make sense of it and handle it and not freak out or stress out or whatever. And you're either doing that or you're an employee, or you're working somewhere else where someone else is doing that for you and it's giving you one job.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing you say is that you quieted all of the external inputs that were coming in, these books and these podcasts, so that you could listen to yourself for once and just make your own decisions. And that's totally what I've kind of come back around to. But here's, I think, a good way of explaining why it's so easy to fall into that trap. And I think there's kind of two things. One, you could think about it this way. Like, let's say you hire a doctor for something. We're so naturally wired to listen to authority. Like, if we think someone has more experience or has authority, we take what they say as like really credible. And so when somebody who is older than you, who has more experience, who's like a quote unquote doctor, or like who, has a lot of skill in a specific area, gives you advice, you like take it really seriously, and it kind of wires in your brain that like, I need to listen to them or something bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
And the reality is, the reason you hire experts is because they're an expert in a really specific area. Like if you hire a finance person, they are killer at helping you with that one item, that one spreadsheet, but they don't know the full context that you know.
No.
And so when you work with these like authorities, you don't want to let yourself get scared or like
offload even. I think there could be like a level of like, okay, now you take care of it. And you're saying like, you kind of still have to be dialed into the big picture.
Totally. So I think the best thing you can do is for sure hire experts, but hire them specifically for their expertise and not other elements and not making other decisions for you. And I think that's what the first thing that's really hard is like we kind of grab on really easily to these people. And that's why like even just, Marie Forleo or like Oprah, whoever it is, like their advice matters to us because we see them as like this ultimate authority. But you really want to kind of parse out how it fits with your own interests and your own desires. And that's how you get in that trap, I think.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I think similar to Adam, I'm sort of in this place which we were in for probably that first 2 years building Death to Stock, which is just like listening to yourself and like not making it all such a big deal either. I mean, I think we can, I definitely had the experience in the year of functionally anxious. The reason I felt that way was because when you start listening to these experts, you think that every decision is going to be like the end of your thing, or like everything you're doing is a house of cards. And so they told me I have to do this one thing, and if I don't do that, this whole thing's going to blow up, and I'm going to be a fraud, and like everything I've built is gone. And so I'd say a big part of my process personally as of lately is just not seeing any one input, any one decision as like that big of a deal anymore. I think that's part of the awareness that comes is like, they told me I should do that, but maybe I won't do that. And like this it's gonna be okay. Right. And if like something messes up, then like I'll fix it, but I can trust myself that I'll just fix it then if that is what happens.
Right. And I think you realize, I mean, unless you're like in a really bad position financially or, emotionally or mentally, I think you realize, especially after 4 years, that everything's a little more resilient than you thought, and that the audience or the clients or the customers that are there have that connection. And so I remember, David, you and I talking a lot about how, growing Death to Stock and having those like initial super fans, and then like growing, and then you have a lot when your audience grows, there's people who are sort of like, I don't remember signing up for this, but you still have all those people that, are really excited to see it shift, or they're flexible when things go wrong. Whereas depending on where you're at in your business, I think you can kind of take on this like unspoken stress that no one is even trying to put on you.
Yeah, truth. What have you, when you guys started, when you guys were first starting sort of Death Stock, as that was kind of getting put together and it was starting to form and become real, what were some examples? I think David's a really good example, like in my brain, of someone who's like choosing your own adventure. What were some things like, just as I'm gonna even say a company, but I know at the beginning you guys would always be like, we're not a startup, we're just a project.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a thing. What were things that you did where you found like early success, like that you stumbled into something really cool?
That's a great question. I think probably framing it in our own minds as a project freed us to make decisions that a business, quote unquote, we didn't have to do the things that a business or a startup had to do, right? Yeah. So I kind of want to make the point, I guess, first, that part of even how you think about it is maybe going to open you up to other things you could be doing, because now you're not like, I have to do all these things because that's what a business does. I guess the first two examples that come to mind in terms of early success is like, I'm very glad that we hacked together the first site, because what we did was, so the cool thing about Death to Stock is like, it's totally bootstrapped. Like we haven't taken any funding ever, aside from the crowdfunding of the road trips. And the way that happened was we just used really like not good looking tools online to make the thing work. And so
our
it was
first
like,
site was like a landing page. It was like a coming soon plugin.
Yeah. And so I'd say we didn't overbuild. Like, I think this is kind of like on the development side, but it's like we only built the bare bones of what was necessary to make the thing happen. And that was a landing page, a MailChimp email list.
Do we even have an email, a logo? I think it was just the words.
Oh yeah. Well, Brandon literally drew a logo on a napkin at Mission Coffee and then like put it in vector, and that was the first logo. That was it.
Yeah.
Like he just did it like while we were hanging out. Yeah. So I'd say we definitely like, this would be different than what most people would do, but like we totally did it bare bones, like DIY. Yeah. And what happened because of that is because we had this website that was like really hacked together, it was like this landing page, and then there was a wedding photography software we used, and then there was this Gumroad page where you'd sign in. It let us manually do what we wanted to build like later. So once we had customers, we had those 416 people sign up, we had money coming in to then build the thing we wanted. Yep. And the other thing I think that was great looking back is when we took that money to the first developer to build the platform, I think I had like 1 or 2 meetings total with a Ruby developer to build like basically an app that was going to take subscriptions, let people download photos. Like I spent 2 meetings. I don't even remember if we designed it. Did we even?
I don't think we did. So
I think that's another thing that I'm kind of like proud of is like, instead of making it so complex and it needs to have all these features and stuff, I can't think of too many other times, even in my experience or experience with other people, where we just let people do the thing that they do. And so what the developer was like, hey, here's exactly what needs to happen. How much is this going to cost? Okay, cool. Okay, when can you have it to us?
Yeah, for sure.
And then 2 months later, we had an app and it was working. And so like, I guess to answer your question, we were really DIY. We didn't like add all this stuff that wasn't necessary. And then this next idea, which is something that we've kind of done ever since, is we know what we want to do, and we just let people who are skilled just do the thing. Yep. So instead of stressing like crazy and like going back and forth and, hey, can you make all these changes and stuff like that, we just had like a few conversations with the developer. He built it. It's done. All of a sudden, we're moving all of our customers over to our own app.
Right. We didn't overthink it. I think also, like, I love that you said that, because one of the biggest reasons we decided we're better to work with companies who are over 2 years old, we're like the best fit, is because we don't like seeing people waste $8,000 on that stuff at the beginning when you're going to change it, or when you're going to shift, or your business model, is different than it was when you started. We almost wish more people DIY hacked the stuff,
and then proved that it worked. So
then did it.
I mean, the people who show up to us to have us build a website for them, who are like, this is what I need, these are the pages I need, this is like where the website's fitting into their existing workflow versus, hey, what pages should we have on our site? We don't really know. What is this about? How do we talk about it? We help people do that, and which is valuable to some people, but when people are able to just show up and we have a couple people we're working with right now who, we go through like a meeting and a half, and they're like, cool, like we'll see it when it's built, and then we're good to go, because they're so clear about what they need, because they've done all of that behind the scenes work on the upfront. Is they get way more. They get way more for you get a lot more, and it's fun to work on
for sure. No, that's huge.
Yeah, it's definitely the best way to work with people who are good at what they do too. Like, I think that's another thing, is just find people who are good at what they do, that have the style that you like, and just let them do it. Like, anytime you're stepping in, you're honestly most of the time making it more complex and like not really helping the project that much.
Right. I remember thinking that when we would pay photographers, like we started funding photographers, and we're like, we just want it to look like your work, because your work is awesome. Like, we're not trying to like give you direction.
Totally. And kind of circling back to the topic we were just talking about a little bit around like removing some of the shoulds or the baggage. I think another place I'm at now, and maybe a year from now I'll be saying something different, but like complexity is the enemy. Like, just keep everything. This is the entropy of an early stage project, startup, whatever. You make everything so much more complex than it needs to be. And either that's what causes the stress, or maybe you're stressed, so you make it more complex. But like, we literally would just like hit up a photographer and be like, hey, we like your style. Will you shoot 10 photos? Here's how much we'll pay you. Yeah. Okay. Send it to us when you're done.
Send me a zip file. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And it like always worked out. And how much work do you not have to do if how much time are you saving if you just do it that way instead of, so yeah, I think I'm also just trying to simplify, because you put all this extra complexity on yourself, and it doesn't really do that much.
Right. And I think, so it just kind of clicked for me, and like the three of us have all worked with Chris McAllister, who's also on the podcast, but this feeling of like, I don't need to prove myself in business, you then don't have to overcomplicate it because you're insecure, because you think it doesn't feel legit. Like, it all, I think, is connected, and let's call this a project. Here's our waiver. It's nothing like crazy. It's just literally words on text. All of that stuff, I think you're more likely to be confident in, or free to be yourself when you're not like trying to prove anything. You're not trying to like appear like your company is bigger than it is. And a lot of that comes from like you said, David, like knowing yourself, knowing who you are.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We just sat down with a financial advisor, coach, and he was like, we sometimes are like, oh yeah, well this expense for our business makes sense because of like X and Y and Z and like this other thing that doesn't show up in the spreadsheets. And then he was like, but how much money do you make because of it? And we're like, so like there's these stupid expenses we're justifying. And he's like, you should spend $15,000 on this because you would obviously make that back. Like that's, we're like, oh, yeah, that's really smart. It's just that simple, straightforward, like do this because this works. And you're like, oh, I had been doing so much sort of justifying or dancing around it. I want to ask you guys, because you guys had, Allie's not a part or active in Death to Stock anymore. You guys had a very cool, like, working relationship with each other. You guys both kind of stumbled into this thing that grew up and exploded. Talk a little bit, not because either of you would probably ask me to bring this up, but I'm going to because it's so valuable. Talk a little bit about how you decided at the early stages, like how to structure, who did what in that, how you worked together, and then ultimately, like, how did you guys keep that awesome all the time? And then Allie exits the company, and then you guys remain friends and supportive, and you're sitting here on a podcast later. Like, right. I think it's a very rare, interesting story, and you guys both took a lot of action on both sides of that to keep. It could have went wrong in a lot of different ways, right? In a lot of different places, and you guys.
You think you see that happen a lot in other companies and businesses, but I think I'll talk first, and then David, you can add to it. But I think one of the biggest things was having those conversations often about what we wanted out of the business. So I always felt like I was heard. There was always like a chance to talk about it. We didn't split it 50-50, like, because I think that's dumb. I don't think anyone should ever do that. So I felt like while we didn't always consider this to be like a huge, like, oh, this is a huge company and we're like faking it till we make it, we still were very respectful of like, okay, what happens when this grows? And I remember sitting in Mission Coffee with our lawyer, David, and just being like, what happens if I ever want to have a kid and I just like don't want to do this anymore? And Mark, our lawyer, was like, yeah, you can do that, just like really plain English, like asking like questions, So I think open communication is huge. Like, you have to be able to talk the entire time.
And being really, and you were always even really specific about, at the most selfish, like individualistic level, this is what I would like to get out of this, and I think that seems rare. When we have those conversations with people, it's always like, oh, I didn't think of that. Or I didn't know that we talk about that with each other. I thought it was like the secret thing that we keep to ourselves.
Right.
Yeah, totally. So I think this topic is probably one of the most like unique, rare things about the Death to Stock thing in general, because it never happens.
Right.
Well, one FYI, if you're starting a business, you're going to run into this. Like, every person who starts a business with anybody else, like, especially if you do more than one, you will run into this. Yeah. And I think the way that went, I don't want to say went down because it sounds like it was bad, but like the way that all worked out, it went up. It did go. No, it went up.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it went up, and like this is probably one of the rarest things. I mean, whether it's a growing company, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
But I think having a working relationship where someone can say, hey, like, I don't want to do this anymore, and here's what I want to do. And me, like, we were at One Line Coffee, and I was like...
It was, like, really crowded, and I was like, hey, I don't think I want to do this anymore.
People, like, listening in. I was like, and I like to think this is the way I reacted. This is what I remember, but maybe I'm making up in my head. But I think it was like, Oh, wow, great. I'm like so happy you
Yeah,
told me.
you were like so cool. You're like, okay, cool. Like you said the word cool. And, you know, I was really, you still get like nervous. You're still like, oh my gosh, like I
Yeah.
don't want to like ruin anyone's life or,
But there's no I think it was because there was I think it's two things maybe. One, there was no expectations aside from I wanted me and you to both only be doing shit that like we thought was really
yeah,
cool and wanted to be working on. And so nobody even if we put pressure on ourselves, no one's making us be here. So
no,
like
right.
just be doing it, and if it doesn't work, like okay, then I'm so happy that you have found something that is going to be more filling because that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I think one was probably just expectation. The other item that I imagine we did without it really being that like seen all the time is, and I think this is like super powerful and it relates to everything we're talking about, is just saying I don't know. Like I think we sort of both probably the whole time never felt so strongly that we had the right answer and the other person was
Yeah.
wrong about anything. I think it was
Yeah.
just like it was always like neither of us know the right answer. Let's like do this or
Yeah.
let's try this out. And so I think that sort of also I think it was having no big expectation of each other, listening to what we both sort of want to be getting out of it and making sure that like it's still working for both of us. And then
Right.
also like not having the answers all the time and just like, just even, and I don't remember a specific time like this, but like, let's say you were designing the website
Yeah.
and you're just like, hey, I think we should really do this. And I'm like, cool. I don't know. Like,
Yeah. You're like, I'm
yeah,
not
that's
like
cool.
dictating. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's so true.
I think that was sort of a big help for that too. But yeah, I think that
Or
if you can stay like that with your business partner, where it's like you're transparent,
exactly.
but maybe us and how we structured it was a big help with
That was
that.
a
Like if it
huge
was,
help.
I think maybe not having it 50-50 was a big.
It was very smart. And that, well, so
Probably
this
step-
ties into what I would say is with the open communication. I know for a fact that throughout the 2 years I was with Death to Stock, I was very like, I'm probably never going to be full time because I have the Wonder Jam. And I remember you being like very understanding of that.
Even in the beginning, I remember at the beginning, you know, David, you were in like, hey, I would like to just like eat peanut butter sandwiches and like sleep on the floor. And Allie was, I'm going to say, past that point of her life, or she like,
Yeah.
Totally.
she has like maybe a different like aesthetic or taste or like standard.
I was eating
It's-
almond butter,
yeah,
not no stir.
Yeah.
yeah.
She's on the can. Okay.
Yeah, I was on
Exactly,
Candida.
yeah. So it's I'm trying to figure out how to say that in a way that doesn't make you sound stupid
I
poor or
totally
her
get
sound
you.
tight.
Yeah.
But
It's
I just remember I remember that conversation of Allie saying, I don't ever need to like, I'm not going to put money out of my account into this. And you being like, I want to kind of dump everything I have into this.
And that's
And
a
I think
huge indicator of like, of split,
the
like
way-
how to
yeah,
split things.
The way I remember it was our lawyer, who's all of our, you know, he was kind of like, okay, well then that means like David owns a lot more because it's like all he's doing, he's putting everything into it.
Yeah.
And Allie's putting less into it, even though as the project had unfolded for the first 3-4 months, it was pretty like 50-50.
Yeah.
And
There comes
you
a
know,
point though where
yeah,
you have to look at that and talk about like that's where, and I'm not like, you know, bragging, but I think if someone was a little bit more egotistical, they would have been like, well, I don't want to be minority owner, you know, I don't want to be owning less. That's not, that was never my goal.
Yeah, and what that did is you were the counterweight with less skin in the game in a good way.
Yeah.
They could be like, actually, like you should just pay yourself. We just shouldn't do that. Like I think that actually probably it's similar to the idea of like this is a project, not a business. Like it kind of freed us up for our working relationship so that you could be a bit more like, hey, like I hear it because you're in the weeds and like you're so day to day with this, but I'm like more relaxed about like it's almost like let you be more relaxed. And you're like, yeah, maybe you don't have to do that. And I'm like, I have to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And you're like, you should pay yourself.
I'm like, I remember being like, David, pay yourself, like for sure.
Yeah. So I think maybe that's also the going back to sort of what that intuitive next step, not listening to other people as much and just kind of doing what works, like maybe that structure also helps support that, because you were able to be kind of that balance. Like you were far enough on the other side that you weren't, I don't know. Yeah. It just so entrenched in like the repetitive day to day of trying to respond to emails or something like that, that like, and I actually really appreciated that. Like that's so valuable, that's cool. Because I remember we would have monthly chats where it was like, I think that's when we talk about what do you want to do, you know, what's interesting. And your perspective was always so valuable because it wasn't so attached. Like it was more like you just wanted to see it succeed and do cool
stay
stuff.
Authentic and Oh, for sure.
So that was like a massive help, and I actually wanted that, and it was awesome.
Yeah, and I think too, like the last point I would say is this feeling of, I mean, it reminds me of any kind of relationship, but like day to day, I wasn't doing the stuff that I wanted to do, even if I still believed in the mission and the business. Like I think some people don't have to weigh those options, or they can kind of push through and do that. But I do think it is rare in that I wasn't mad at anyone. I wasn't like, I don't agree with what's going on. I think it was like, honestly, just as selfish, like this isn't what I want to do every day. And I own this other business, you know?
And that's probably the best. I mean, for me personally, that's like the best reason I could hear, because ultimately, if you look at, and this is, I think, the other thing that I'm sort of like on about these days is just really, I mean, it's kind of like the simplicity thing, but it's like, what are you doing this for?
Yes.
Why are you doing this? Why are you making those decisions? And I think we definitely kept in perspective that this is something that should be empowering for our lifestyles and exciting and interesting. And so if you keep your eyes there, then if something breaks from that, which is like, hey, I'm not feeling as excited about this, or like I'm more excited about this thing, that's the purpose anyway. So why continue doing something if it's not reaching these like goals or targets that you're after anyway? So I think it's like you were on point in leaving. You were leaving for the exact right reason you should be, which is the whole reason we were doing any of it anyways.
Right. No, that's so true.
I mean, I think that's to me. I think if I look back as like the third wheel from that whole story, I think David, you were doing enough like super random shit like that. Something you would have like stuck an idea that had found its time, and you would have like doubled down on it. I think you were smart enough, and you were freaking making newspapers and like other random things in the world that you would have found something. Like something would have connected. And if you had pitched companies on doing their social media road trips a year later, maybe that would have been the time where everybody's like, you know, that's like the thing. So I think you would definitely done it. Allie would have definitely like pushed on her creativity, regardless of whether or not it was that thing. But I think the way that the two of you collaborated with each other and respected each other, to me, seems like we've worked with almost 300 different small businesses or brands, and it's like that's just super rare. It just never happens.
I always love meeting people, and I'm like, oh yeah, I started Death to Stock with David, but I don't do it anymore. And they're like, oh, how's that? And I'm like, it's fine. I was like, I just got coffee. Cool. I'm like, I just got coffee with him. It's cool.
Yeah, totally. And maybe it's just, that's like the thing for everybody, is just like if you can understand more about yourself and know what you want, and know if the thing you're doing is helping you get closer to what you want or not, or like fulfilling that thing, then it's just, if we can all kind of be in that place, it's just easier for us to like relate and let everybody just do their, like, I want everybody to win. If that makes sense. Like, I just want everybody to do their thing. And if this is working for you and it's helping you, then like, let's do this together. And if it's not helping you, then you should like go, don't stay here.
Go do something else.
Yeah. It reminds me of Kevin Kelly, who runs Wired Magazine, which we brought that up. He traveled for, I think, 10 years before he started Wired Magazine, like just around the planet. He's a bit older now, but he talks about how when he came back and like 10, 15 years into running Wired, there'd be interns who were like 24 And since he had traveled from like 24 to 34, he's like, what are you doing here? Like, leave. Like, don't.
I'm firing you. No.
Yeah, he like didn't want people who were, because he wanted them to like do their thing and travel.
That's
and,
amazing.
I mean, maybe they want to be doing Wired.
Right,
but
right.
It's just kind of funny. It's just
but
like
he's like, only if you want to. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's huge. I feel that. I mean, I very much I run a business using my intuition and gut more than other people's advice. And so, you know, I remember one time my mom was going back to school and she called me like really upset about just like the school that she was going to, and it was stressful. And she's like, I think I might switch to this other one, but I just don't know. And I remember being like, you should definitely switch. Like, what's the worst that could happen? You just don't like it like this one, you know? And I think,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, so I have a really important question, and I don't know if I know the answer, but I think for people who are listening to this, it's maybe something that would pop into your head too. And it's okay, and I totally get it, and that's what I'm on too, is like you want to run your business with your intuition, your gut, and you want to work on the things you want to work on. What is the downside? If any? I'm not saying there has to be one, but like I think, and I'm trying to work and live this way too, and I think you can make it work. Like that's my belief because I know I've done it.
Yep.
And I'm getting back to that place now. But like when you hear that, it just sounds so idyllic.
Yeah,
and
not.
And there's definitely
Yeah.
stress. But I guess I'll just repeat the question. Like I think a lot of people want to run a business with their intuition and gut and not accept the shoulds from others and just build it their way. What is the downside? Or is there a downside?
I would say, and Adam might have a different answer because he sees me as like, you know, he's not me. But I feel like doing that it's made it harder for us to grow, because in order to grow, I have to work with some people that I would normally be like, oh, I don't know, like I want it to be like that. I want them to feel like my best friends, or I want them to be like this, or day in and day out, based on my intuition or my gut, this is what I want to do every day. Or like, I don't want to have a meeting, but in order to grow, there's more people, more cooks in the kitchen, and you're bringing people on. So I think for me, intuition and gut was great but to grow it you start seeing a little bit of friction. Would you say the same thing?
Yeah, I think the word I would use was that your intuition you will not be predictable to people, which makes it more difficult to
have processes or systems.
What you're going to be feeling like. I remember at the very beginning, in the early days of like the Wonder GM, you would cancel a lot more meetings than you do today. Yeah. Because you're like, I don't feel good today, or I don't feel like going to that, or I'm like not inspired to. You would, be a lot more like, I'm gonna say picky about who your clients were, because it was just like, I want to work with people who would be my friends. And now understanding, okay, I really, now it's like I want to have these people on my team more than I
care about my own preferences, even
whether I want to go to a meeting or not.
Yeah, and I think your intuition can shift from like leaning on it as a crutch, and I think now it's very much more. I think I'm tapping into the intuition of what is my team feeling like, and the intuition about like what does my client need versus what do I want.
I mean, I think like, you know, in the modern world, when I think of intuition, I think Kanye West is like the ball of like ego and intuition and just whatever he feels like doing. And I, you know, the most recent tour he did, I went to the show that was in Columbus, and I was like, this is amazing. And I bought tickets at 3 other places, like other cities, to go with people to, because I was like, this is amazing. I would want to go to this as much as I possibly can. And in the middle of it, for reasons that have yet to become public, we don't know, he canceled like the second half of his tour. And he might have, in whatever world, just been like, I'm not doing this anymore, which is fine. But it is, you cannot bank on somebody who's following their intuition. And maybe it's okay to not have to bank on everybody. Like maybe we don't, maybe nobody owes me as just a human like the right to dictate whatever the rest of their life looks like, or to commit to something just repeatedly over time. Maybe that's not how humans are wired up. But I think when people are trying to work with you as a business owner or as a leader or whatever, they want to, people like to know what to expect.
But I think now I'm much more like, I'm going to make this decision because intuitively I can tell that this is what is best for the people that are doing work for us or the people that I'm contractually obligated and want to help. And so a lot of it has to do with, I think if you want to be intuitive and trust your gut, but you don't know yourself and you don't have someone to challenge you and you don't have like opportunities to grow and to change or to change your mindset, then your intuition and your gut ends up just sort of being like a crutch and an excuse to not be an adult or something, So, I definitely think, yeah.
Yeah, and so not to drag this out, but I want to hear about the flip side now, which is what does it look like if you have a business without your intuition and gut, which I think maybe partly explains my 2 years of what I was kind of saying is like baggage or whatever, but I don't know if you, and I thought those are both super well-spoken answers, but yeah, now let's talk about the flip side.
Yeah,
so
when you don't.
There is some downside. I don't think it's obviously either or.
Right.
But what happens, and have you felt in a place where there isn't that intuition and you're not using your gut? And so I guess I think we all have to find our own balance of this. I think
both.
that's probably the reality. But
yeah.
I do want. We just heard about the downside of one side of that. Now, what is it like if your business is removing the intuition and gut? And or have you seen that with clients? You don't have to talk about who, but like, what does that look like?
Oh, I mean, I think of two different things. The first I think of, so with running off of intuition and gut is Adam was referencing like we're working with a financial coach, and what was really cool was I was actually pulling numbers out of thin air based on my intuition and gut, whether it's like how much I'm paying people or how much I'm charging or how much I think I'm making on things. And I was actually really accurate. Like I think that I was surprised that the math proved that my gut feeling was right. But there have been many, many years where it's not. So I think like to not use your intuition or gut, I don't know. It feels like one, I have found with our own business, we've gotten into client relationships where morale is altered because I bypassed my intuition and we worked on something that was just like not great for our team. And so, yeah, the bills are paid and people are paid, but what does that mean if people are stressed out and don't like the work that they're doing? And so, yeah, the feeling of like the pros and cons of like what's the downfall of trusting your gut, but then what happens when you don't, I think.
Yeah, but it's almost like, if you go over time and you don't trust your gut, like David, if you don't trust your gut and make all the decisions that I'm sure there's a million people who, not a million, hopefully not a million, but there's a lot of people who didn't understand what you were doing at the beginning, right out of college, who were like, why isn't he getting a job somewhere? Why isn't he doing some other thing? Like, I'm sure if you don't trust your gut then, you don't learn all the stupid lessons that you become you become pretty in tune with later over time. So it's, the downside of trust, the downside of it is probably lead you to bump into all of the boundaries and learn about yourself in a way that helps it so that when you're 30, you can trust your gut like a wizard versus just be starting at that point.
Right. But then I think if you quiet your gut, all I can think of is like gut health, like drink a probiotic. If you quiet your intuition, I think that's where you get into, things make sense on paper, but in 4 months, are you going to be sitting at your desk doing tasks that you don't enjoy? And so there's so many analytics and stats and numbers that you can look at. Let's use even social media as an example. Like you can monitor stuff, but if you just go with like, for me, like if I'm running our Instagram, I'm putting out things that I want to be hired to do. And I don't really care how many likes it gets, and I don't look at that stuff. That's like a really specific example, but I think, we could download reports and figure out like, well, this gets better engagement, but
Yeah. Oh, that's even, I went in, this podcast isn't sponsored by Unlearning Coffee, but it should be. But I remember going in there, and they've been super helpful teaching me about coffee and all kinds of stuff as I've worked on Ardor and launching that. And I remember talking to Sean. Well, everyone you talk to there, they know 100 times more than I know about coffee, and I know 100 times more than an average person. And they're just so far beyond me. And I remember talking to Sean, and I was telling him how I picked the coffee that I was going to choose to end up roasting. And he's like, you don't need very much training to start to have a really intuitive sense of what kind of coffee is great. And what happened with me is I just roasted like 40 or 50 different types of coffee from different farms. And I just picked the one that I was like, oh, this seems special. Like, I don't know anything. I can't describe flavor notes. I don't know if I even roasted it right, but this one seemed special. And I later did some homework and was like, oh, this one was the top rated of everything I picked. But I came to that same conclusion
on your
totally
own.
Accidentally. And I think it's very possible to we're smarter than we like to give ourselves credit for sometimes.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And honestly, now it just makes me think that when it comes to trusting yourself and listening to your own voice, which is a lot of kind of what we talked about, like, I'd almost say that learning how to listen to your intuition is probably the most beneficial practice you can have, like, in your early stage, whenever that is for you.
For sure.
And the longer you delay that, the harder it is to, like, re-engage into that. And so I think when it comes to kind of our background in starting Death to Stock and where I am now, we very much started from that place of, just listening to your gut. And then when I kind of launched out after we split, it was like I went the other way and I swung the pendulum like totally away from my gut. But I was kind of training in a way to listen to my intuition even more than ever. And part of that is working with Chris and just like really spending a lot of time thinking about this stuff and also going through a lot of stress. But I'd probably say, and this is maybe just advice for everybody, is that the intuition piece, like, there needs to be a balance between what's your intuition and what sort of logically needs to get done, or what are people saying.
Yep.
But having a clear way of hearing your own voice and what it's saying is like the most important thing that you can work on developing. So I guess, it's tight, or it's really tough for us to, balance that and figure out what the right mix is between the two. But if you can develop your sense and your intuition, it's just so important. Yeah. It's what's going to help free you, honestly,
huge,
from stress, from what other people want from you, from making choices that put you on the right path in the right direction towards where you actually want to head, instead of I think you can almost picture it like this. Like, if you're only listening to other voices and you're making decisions out of stress and fear, then you're heading in a direction that is actually like a totally different path or road than you want to be going down. And the farther you go, the farther away you are from going back the other direction. And if you're following your intuition, you're probably going to find yourself in a better place in the next year or two than you are now.
Oh, yeah. Well, like, my last example, and then I know Adam has one last question, is I have, like, intuitively knew I want to fire a client. And we can work then with our financial advisor to say, hey, I can actually help you figure out what to try to negotiate toward, like, you can say either take this or I walk. Instead of just saying, like, my intuition says that I don't like this working relationship anymore, so I'm going to fire them. He's equipping me with, like, not an intuitive plan. Like, he's like, no, this actually is number-wise what you should do. And so you talked about, David, like, finding that guru or that specific professional within some sort of part of your business, whether it's like your lawyer, your accountant, or a health coach or a doctor. Let your intuition also affect your relationship with them and share that,
be really upfront with those people.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that's such a good example.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Adam.
I'm going to say this as a disclaimer. That situation will have been resolved before this podcast airs. So if you're currently one of our clients...
Yeah, you'll know. No, I'm just kidding.
You.
They won't listen to this.
For sure. I was just imagining somebody... what I was imagining was our friend Simi, who we all know, listening to this because she would.
Yeah.
And loving us and supporting us and hearing that and being like, oh no, I hope
Simi,
I
it's not you.
So the last question I have for both of you, you both have mentioned Chris McAllister a couple of times. He's a business coach, author, speaker, who's helped all of us an insane amount. So besides Chris, because that would be an obvious answer, has there been other things that you've invested in as a business owner or things you would definitely recommend other people invest in, as far as places you've gone to get help, or even like books you read, like not just as generic, like what are your favorite books, but something that's made a big difference for you. They're like, hey, if you're like me, or if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, oh man, you really resonate with what I'm saying, these are some places or some people or some, what have you invested in that's paid off? And that's for both David, for you for sure, but Allie as well.
David,
Allie,
you can go.
Wanna...
No, you
okay,
can go.
I can start. So I think both of us are going to definitely talk about the health side of things.
Yes.
So I almost it's almost difficult for me to talk about this because I've invested so much.
Yeah.
Like I have really kind of become a freak about investing in this type of stuff, whether it's health or coaching or just any assistance and kind of like guidance. So, man, I've gotten so much assistance and help from different people. One, health related stuff. Long story short, last year I was getting into a bad place health wise. And mostly it was just due to stress. And so I have gotten very proactive in working with a doctor, which is the same doctor Allie sees, talking to a dietitian, getting that on point. I worked out with your brother, Allie, as a trainer. I mean, I have really tried to find a lot of different experts to help me with their knowledge in dialing in different aspects of my life that need to be dialed in, because when you own a business, like there is a lot of stress that comes from that. You are doing something that is different than what a lot of people are used to. And so you face some different challenges. And yeah, I've really spent a lot of time and worked with a lot of people, and I've never hesitated to invest in that, almost maybe to a fault. Like I think at this point, actually, I can like listen to myself again a little bit more too, which is sort of what you're saying. But man, over the last 2-3 years, I have really spent a lot of time, and I personally believe that you should spend as much time on yourself as you do your business. So I almost see half my day as my personal development and half my day is working on the business. And here's why. If you are personally growing and becoming more valuable, your business will become more valuable. So,
that's like what my 100-day challenges have been, is like, it's like investing in my brain and creativity so that I'm like a better person.
All of the creative people who go through coaching with me, it's always this, they're like wrestling to keep their client projects also their passion projects. And I'm like, actually, if you just find your own selfish thing that you just make yourself, you start to release some of that like angstiness out on your clients, and you can start to just serve them and not try and be like, well, you have to make this video the way I want to make videos.
Totally.
Yeah, it's cool.
So, I mean, I know, Allie, you're going to touch on health stuff, but I think just my perspective on that is like, I think people would be shocked how much better their life gets when they dial in their health. I mean, it's like one of the only things that's like too good to be true. You're like, no, actually, if you like change your diet and work out, you will feel like 1,000 times better. Like, yeah, it's like the one thing that's actually like, no, that's real.
You're like, I have no proof really, but I know that it's
I remember
true.
I grew up in like the world I was in was like a hyper sort of spiritualized one. And like all problems were like a spiritual problem. And I remember starting to like get some of my nutrition on point, being like, oh, I think maybe just my macronutrients were off. Like, I mean, it wasn't, I remember, David, you were the person who told me once, I remember you started taking vitamin D supplements or something. And I asked you if you noticed any difference. And you said, I don't know if you even remember this, but I remember you said, I feel more optimistic. Like optimism was the difference that, as how you described it, which I think is such a it's just such a testament to how much health and all that stuff affects your life.
Yeah.
Also, we're not going to list the doctor that you guys see because it's already hard enough to like get a meeting with him. So if you'd like to go there, good luck.
Try texting me if you have my number. No.
Yeah, right.
We'll totally put the link.
Is there any... It's good. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Is there anything else
I would say the same. I would say health.
Health is like key for
Huge.
you.
I mean, like the past 2 months, I've probably been like the laziest I've been. And when you're tired, you feel like you're overworked. You feel like things aren't fair. You feel like people are being unreasonable.
Yeah.
If you just, get some rest, drink your water.
I remember like, this was like a couple months ago, but Allie we were getting on a client call, and Allie looked at me and she's like, I do not want to do this. I'm like, you said I don't want to do this. And I was like, that's not true. You're just tired as freak. Like, you didn't sleep good last night. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to confuse the work or the people or the relationships or the friendships that are in front of you with
fatigue
or how your body's acting in the moment.
So, I have one more point that I think is maybe a weird way to end, but
Nice.
After I was like super stressed out, I actually started just doing much better, like from a health perspective, and I had seen that doctor, and I was like starting to do a lot better. But I found a cognitive behavioral therapist in Santa Monica.
That's amazing.
And honestly, like that's been so good. I think the reason I want to bring that up is just because I feel like it's such like a stigma. I was already feeling pretty good when I started seeing him, and like I'm probably almost done. I think I've probably gone like 12 times.
That's
but
amazing.
It's like the extra boost of coffee or something like that. Like I just feel a lot even better than I did. So I just think if you're feeling like pretty burnt out or pretty stressed out, like I think that's actually a pretty decent option for people. I just like went on Yelp.
Okay.
And
That's
so
amazing.
I feel like it's I just want to bring that up because I think there is like an interesting stigma around that, and I don't know. I just think that's been a big help in me, like getting even more confident about just like my business and stuff like that, and just energy. So
I love it.
That's been something that's like been super cool too. I don't know. I think there's like no harm in just like chatting
Trying
with somebody.
it.
Yeah, and then also it just helps you kind of know a little bit more about yourself. So
That's amazing.
That's killer, man. Well, thanks for chatting. We could talk for like 7
I know.
hours. I'm just gonna like stop the podcast out of an arbitrary random thing. I'll just decide that this moment is the one when it's done.
Yeah, right.
Is there anything, if people want to follow along, check you out somewhere, where do people do that?
Yeah, so I'm really not on social media a ton anymore, but they can email me. I'd be happy to give my personal email. It's davidsherry .36@gmail.com. So feel free to reach out if you have questions. I mean, I'm on Instagram a bit. You can just search David Cherry. I'm sure you'll find me. And then if you go to death2stock.com, that's also where you'll see just like the stuff that's going on with Death to the Stock Photo. So thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited about your guys' podcast, and I can't wait to listen.
Cool.
Thanks, you.
Thanks, David.
Love
Cool.
you.
All right. Yeah. Love you guys too. See ya.
Or someone's like, what is their business model? And I remember like hanging out with you and we were like, well, we don't make money yet.